Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Spiceworks Partner webinar. My name is Ophelia, and I'll be your host for today's session brought to you by KnowBe4. We have Senior Vice President of Cyber Operations, Rosa Smothers, here to discuss leveraging open source intelligence to improve security awareness and training. Just a few reminders before we get started. This session will be available on demand, so if you miss anything or have to step away, a link will be sent to you so you can view it at your convenience. There is additional info on today's topic available for you to download in the resources section, so be sure to check that out. And lastly, if you want to chat with your fellow webinar friends, feel free to join in the conversation. As a reminder, our chat does follow the community guidelines, so be sure to keep things fun and professional and stick around to the end where we'll announce our prize winner. So with that, I'll pass things over to Rosa to get started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Rosa Smothers. I'm Senior Vice President of Cyber Operations at KnowBe4. And today we're going to be talking about open source intelligence, leveraging OSINT to improve security and security awareness training. So a little bit about me. Like I said, Senior Vice President at KnowBe4. I've got to be honest, it's really 25 years at this point. You have years of cybersecurity experience. I spent over a decade at the CIA as a cyber threat analyst and a technical intelligence officer. I also worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency as a cyber threat analyst, and I've got a master's in network security. So again, thank you for joining today. I want to bring to you some of the knowledge and experience I gained while working in the intelligence community. OSINT is its own intelligence source, and want to show you kind of some different ways to leverage it and how hackers are leveraging some of those tools as well. So previously on Rosa's OSINT webinars. So I've provided two previous webinars, one with my dear friend James McQuiggan, and the first OSINT webinar I strongly recommend checking out for a number of reasons. I'll explain to you about that on the next slide, but also what we're going to cover today, how to conduct a cyber investigation, keeping in mind practical things like, will you have to work with law enforcement? What will they expect? What about the insurance company, et cetera, legal ramifications, OSINT collection and OSINT collection tools, penetration testing using OSINT tools, and then some apps and analytic techniques that you can use problem solving if you want to work more on the cyber threat intelligence realm, or if you're looking for attribution. So going back to that first OSINT webinar I provided. So I always say I want you to maintain a healthy sense of paranoia. It's not if the bad folks are going to be after you, it's just a matter of when. So when you're conducting these open source investigations, it's very important, and I talk about more in depth in the first webinar about making sure that your computer is set up to quarantine and not potentially infect systems based on certain websites you're going to, especially if you're looking on the dark web. Some websites are specifically designed to inject malicious code into your browser and subvert your system. So, again, I go into in the first webinar I provided a couple of years ago, I go into more detail on that, but keep in mind, you want to maintain some sort of quarantine using a VM, using a throwaway laptop, just to maintain that safety posture. So let's go on to how do we conduct an investigation. So a couple of aspects to this, right? So keeping in mind all of those external stakeholders. So like I'd mentioned on the last slide, insurance, law enforcement. So there are some basic steps, and some people will say there are 5 steps, some say 6, 7, but these are kind of how I group steps of an investigation, what that process looks like. So identification, obviously that is of the essence. Identifying the method of entry. Did the hacker use social engineering? Was it an unpatched system? Was it a breached password? Those are the three main methods by which hackers and nation states gain access to your network environment. And the digital footprints. So we want you, from a law enforcement and investigative perspective, to preserve the evidence. You know how on certain like police and investigative shows, they're always not contaminating the physical evidence. Well, the cyber evidence is just as important to keep contamination free. In law enforcement, they call it chain of custody, wanting to ensure that if there is a hard drive that the perpetrator has gained access to, or there's malicious software on it, they need to know that no one else has written to that hard drive since that incursion occurred. So, and typically, especially when you're dealing with a security operations center, speed and time is of the essence because you're talking about incident response. So the faster you can identify that breach, the sooner you can obviously kick the malicious actor off of your systems and begin that recovery process. So the next step is the next step in any process after the identification is the investigation process. So I've listed here a number of very well-known tools, whether it's digital forensic software. So if you need to examine a hard drive or you need to examine a phone, Celebrite is really well-known in law enforcement circles for phone examinations. InCase or Forensic Toolkit are two other really well-known forensic applications. You can look at deleted files, conduct metadata analysis, whatnot. Network analysis tools, most of us know Wireshark, NetScout, TCP dump. You want to conduct that in preliminary investigation, and the goal is to identify all the systems and services that have been affected by this network incursion. And that way you can kind of scope the level of damage. Was it a single corporate account that was compromised? Would the hacker have access to anything that the employee viewed? What were the privileges of that account? Was that corporate account, someone that works in IT admin who has a lot of privileges on the network? And counter to that, if there was a ransomware attack, they could have, potentially exfiltrated every piece of sensitive information on your network. So that's why the network analysis tools are so important to identify not only the suspicious activity, but those data flows. And then lastly, various social media analysis tools. And that can come into play if, for instance, the network incursion involves a known email address or an email selector, because you can then kind of run down that username or versions of that username across various social media accounts to hopefully conduct attribution at that point. Then we're going to talk a little bit about analysis. Obviously, as a former CIA analyst, this is something near and dear to my heart. A lot of these investigations can encompass an extraordinary amount of data. Now, it might be one hard drive, but if you're talking about gigabytes of data, that's a lot to go through. Certain broader network examinations might incorporate a lot of external data, net flow data, for instance. So how do you manipulate and collaborate on all of that data with potentially outside analysts or outside experts? And then leveraging various analytic techniques. I'll talk a little bit about structured analytic techniques. These are some things that I was taught at the CIA in what was called the Career Analyst Program track for analytic training. And you can apply some of those training methodologies here when you're conducting this sort of analysis. Remediation. So obviously the risk assessment is so important. Now that you've got a clear understanding, you've pieced together what's happened, you can draw some conclusions about the incident, the incursion, and then look for ways to resolve it. The specific actions you're going to take at this stage are really dependent upon the nature of the incident. Again, was it a ransomware attack? Was it a social engineering attack? Was it, was it some sort of outdated software on the network that was not anticipated or just hadn't been accounted for in the inventory? So you've got to have that comprehensive plan for those remediation efforts. And then you've got to have documentation. Again, for reporting purposes, that documentation is so important, as well as I mentioned earlier, In some cases, your organization may want to involve law enforcement. If you think you're being attacked by, for instance, a nation state potentially, the Lazarus group, the hackers that are typically attributed to North Korea, that would be an instance in which if you suspect it looks like a lot of the methodologies are very similar. It's a ransomware attack. You might find that some of the malicious software on a hard drive is the same. Well, at that point, you're going to want to reach out to the nearest FBI field office, or you might want to report that incident to CISA, which is the Department of Homeland Security Cyber Investigation and Cyber Incident Organization. And whatever documentation that you can provide, showing the timeline, showing the tools that you used, your findings, potential attribution, every little bit of that you can do is going to help you in the investigative process, because certainly when it comes to especially Department of Justice and FBI, it can take a long, long time because they are inundated with these cases, unfortunately. So the more that you can do on the front end to build the case for them, the better off everyone's going to be. So next, I'm going to move on to open source collection. So it's 2023, soon to be 2024. It is increasingly easy to hack technology and to hack humans. There's so much information out there now. Every day we go to a website and we are inundated with those flags that come up and say, do you accept all of our cookies, or do you want to accept none of our cookies? Well, the thing about those cookies that they're pulling out of your web browser is those are then sent to what are called data brokers. And there are increasing numbers of these data broker vendors out there. The last time I checked, and I checked this fairly recently, there are over 750 data brokers out there. And because we don't have the privacy laws in the United States that our European partners do with GDPR, it is a very large and vast ecosystem. These organizations don't steal your personal information. They gather the information from the public, and they package it nicely and they put it on the market. So there are brokers that are really well known, like Spokio or ZabaSearch. They've been around for a very long time, but there are increasing numbers of these data broker vendors because it's a very large market. They're collecting information based upon your web browsing history. They've got your name, your state, your address, just enough data to confirm who you are, where you're located. And so someone who's looking for you from a hacker perspective, they don't have to pick just one data broker site. So you can go to multiple data brokers and your information has been harvested, and they can build entire profiles of you based upon that information that's been harvested. These data brokers know as much about you as your Amazon cart and your Netflix queue. And again, there are at least 750 of these companies currently. There are some vendors out there from a personal security perspective that actively remove your information from these data broker sites. So it is something that, from a hacker perspective, I'm going to go to these data broker sites. I'm going to look at my targets of opportunity, who are going to be the individuals in the company that are higher profile, that have great administrative access on the network, because I want those network privileges and those permissions. I'm going to build that profile based on the information that's gleaned from these data vendors. Cost me a couple of bucks to get a membership with these various organizations. I download the information in a report. And at that point, I start building my plan, whether it's the hacking plan of technical hacking or social engineering hacking, which is where your security awareness comes in. You can build profiles on social media, on LinkedIn, Facebook. Again, going back to the North Koreans and the Chinese intelligence services are often building LinkedIn profiles, and they're trying to engage with people because they want your intellectual property. So this is a prime example of a huge resource of information out there that a lot of people don't even know these organizations exist. And there's an enormous amount of information on the key people in your organization. So again, from a security perspective, I strongly recommend a program that allows for at least your what I would call high value target employees to use some sort of a data cleaning service. There are a number of them out there. So please consider that as part of your overall cyber hygiene perspective. So now I'm going to go into a couple of walkthroughs and give you some demos on some what I call very user-friendly ways to look for people via social media. And what I like about these is a lot of these tools are just super easy to use. If you're in the middle of an investigation, you don't have time to learn super complex apps. You don't need a PhD to use a lot of these tools I'm going to show you. And several of them are in fact free. So the first one I'm going to show you all it's called What's My Name?
So one great tool I wanted to highlight for you all is What's My Name? It's a web-based app. A lot of developers were involved in building this app out, and the interface is super easy to use. As you can see, it doesn't require a great deal of explanation. You just, copy your username or your email address or email selector, as we say in the intelligence community, and paste into the space bar. So in this case, I'm just going to look for John Doe, because that's a very generic username. Now you can add multiple accounts in here. You could do also a comma and then a Jane Doe, but we'll stick with John Doe for now. And also to highlight over here on the left, these category filters. So, for instance, if you know that your suspected hacker is into health, is potentially a weightlifter, or is a musician, plays guitar, or is a gamer, you could highlight these specific groups, and then What's My Name will focus their search on those specific repositories. But I always like to start out with all, and then kind of hone down my search from there. So we'll check this out. Simply hit the search button, and then boom, look at all of these results. It's fantastic. And it's great because, this is so much better than doing a general DuckDuckGo or Google search, because you're seeing not only the sites, but I like seeing the categories, that it's social, financial, hobby related, art related, because knowing the types of interests that your target has really helps you build out a profile of the individual. And what's a great testament to the What's My Name web app is it's actually been integrated into several other OSINT tools, one in particular, Spiderfoot, of which I'm also a big fan. So, again, I'm a big believer in ease of use, because when you're conducting an investigation, often time is of the essence, and it's very easy to have all hands on deck with these very easy to use web interfaces. So What's My Name Web, definitely check it out for use in your investigations. So another great and more importantly, free and easy tool is this namecheckup.com account. It's actually made to check the availability of usernames and domain names on social media and across varying platforms, as you can kind of see here towards the bottom of the screen. But it's great for investigative purposes, because you're kind of looking at it from the perspective of process of elimination. So, for example, we'll stick with our John Doe. Run that search. And look at the username data that is populating. So we're really focused on the grayed out boxes, these kind of like pale pink gray boxes, because that means there's been a username taken at that social media website. So then you would, at that point, you would click on GitHub, Medium, Pinterest, and then log into that social media account, and then drill down on the username, check out the user's activity. Again, you're kind of building that profile of your suspected hacker in this case. So again, free and easy to use, super simple. And it allows you to refine your search. So if you're going on Facebook or Meetup or Pinterest, you can drill down and, it's investigations are an iterative process. So you start sifting from that large base of information. So in this case, all of these accounts where that John Doe username is at work, and then you start drilling down individually and then looking for commonalities among all of those accounts to see if this is the same John Doe across Medium, across Pinterest, across Periscope, and whatnot. So again, it's a free and easy tool, and something that is just another easy tool in your toolbox for your investigative needs. So next, I wanted to familiarize you all with OSINT framework. It's kind of a great bridge between talking about OSINT collection, and then we're going to transition next to pen testing and attack surface, because this does a little bit of all of that. It was really designed to gather information from free tools or resources, but over time, the more information he gathered, some of them did require registration or payment. So you'll see the legend up here at the top of the screen, which ones require, registration. There may be some sort of payment required, or if you have to install something locally. Not everybody wants to do that. Most folks, really prefer to do web-based only instead of running code on their local machine. So the great thing about OSINT framework is, again, it's very point and click and category based, so it makes searches incredibly easy. Username, email address, domain name, lots of useful resources appear in the form, as you see, of a subtree. For instance, like when you're looking under IP address, you can see, all kinds of things like protected cloud services, general registration information, border gateway protocol, network analysis tools. And the same thing happens with other locations like email address. Let's see, where's email address? Here we are. Email address information to include breach data. So KnowBe4 uses a really great website called Have I Been Pwned? And this is one of the information websites that they collect information from as well, breached data information. So it's just a great all-around tool. And again, it's both technical and non-technical images, videos, and docs, social network information, people search engines, but also more technical information available as well, like metadata, dark web information, very valuable, because again, it keeps you off, anything that keeps you off the dark web is going to keep you safer. So if you can leverage these sorts of collections from the dark web collection here, or from Dehashed or Have I Been Pwned, the safer you will be. Exploits and advisories. So this is just a great information resource. It's, again, it's kind of similar to Shodan or ZoomEye or some of the other Internet of Things devices, but having the social network data incorporated, that really helps to make it a truly holistic tool. So even when it comes down to phone numbers and whatnot. So it's a great overall resource. I highly recommend folks leveraging this, because it's just almost unlimited the ways that you can get some data out of any target that you're investigating, because that is certainly what the hackers out there are doing right now. They're using tools just like this to investigate you and your organization.
Right. So, keeping in mind, a lot of this is very much involved with the collection of, it's not just social networks in the way that we typically think of them. It's also media sharing networks, discussion forums, curation and content environments, blogging, things like that. So, it's a huge collection of information, incredibly beneficial. So I wanted to move on to next, talk a little bit about everyone's favorite, Kali Linux and Metasploit. So I'm not going to go into a big demo. I'm just going to talk about it briefly, because really these require the need for the end user to know how to leverage Linux, likely have how to write with Python. Now, I would highly recommend, if anyone really wants to get into the nitty gritty, to go to Kali.org. Kali Linux, it's an open source Debian-based Linux distribution, and it's really geared, structured from the bottom up for security tasks, penetration testing, security research, computer forensics, as I'd mentioned earlier, and even reverse engineering if you really want to get into the weeds with your malware. And you can buy, VM-based, USB-based, all kinds of different versions of it comes prepackaged, which is incredibly helpful. Now, I want to talk to you briefly about Sherlock, which is a social media tool that's available on Kali. And you can also get it off of GitHub if you have a GitHub account. But it's great because it finds usernames kind of similar to the open source tool I just showed you at OSINT Framework. It can pull usernames from upwards of 300 different sites. It's free, it's open source, it's written in Python. But it's a really great, powerful way to correlate usernames across so many different media. And then lastly, Metasploit. I am asked pretty frequently, actually, does the intelligence community use Metasploit? Do hackers use Metasploit? Yes, hackers, whether they're in the intelligence community or wherever they're living, are going to use the best tools at hand. Some of them are going to be written, by the organization, but some of them are public and available. And Metasploit is a great, great tool. It's a great pen testing framework that I can guarantee you the adversaries are using to check your environment out. Security engineers use it, red teams use it as a pen testing tool and as a development platform. So it allows for the creation and building of both security tools and exploits. So it works for both attackers and defenders. So I would recommend, if you've got the time and the willingness to do it, and you want to learn some command line, or if you already have a master of it, I'm sure you're already using Kali and Metasploit and Sherlock. But if you don't, this is an operating system, Kali Linux, and these two tools, Metasploit and Kali. I highly recommend looking into all three of these if you want to really dig deep into the command line for both pen testing and for just general OSINT work. So speaking of pen testing, so I want to talk a little bit about the attack surface planning and how that works in terms of the OSINT tools. So several of these tools that I've already shown you, obviously, it's not just about the social engineering aspect, it's also the network attack surface environment that a lot of these tools are helping you locate. And, again, whether it's Metasploit or whether it's, OSINT framework, a lot of those are going to help you with some general attack surface stuff. I mentioned the previous Shodan census or some other examples that I'd shown in a previous webinar, in my second webinar with James. So I want to show you now one of my favorite websites that I'm quite a fan of, and I don't think nearly enough people are taking great advantage of it. It's called Central Ops.
So thinking in terms of the hacker's perspective when it comes to pen testing, and again, in keeping with, looking for tools that are preferably free and easy to use. Not all of them are, but I'm trying to show you some of those in that vein. Central Ops is a great website. I've been using them forever. They are very much to me like the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive, archive.org. They're just an oldie but a goodie. They provide free online network tools, tools that I'm sure most, if not all of us are aware of, traceroute, NS lookup, ping. We all know those from, back in the early days of the internet. But they also have some great tools like Domain Dossier. The Domain Dossier tool generates reports from public records about domain names and IP addresses, and that can really assist in cybercrime investigation. So there are a couple of applications that can be leveraged using these tools available. So network troubleshooting, obviously, ping, trace out, DNS lookups, those goes without saying, right? Domain name research, the Whois lookup tool is always going to be very handy in that regard. Also network security, and email analysis. So email dossier, I really like this one. So I put in my email selector, my KnowBe4 account here, Rosa S at knowbe4.com. And I select go, and I can see in no time flat that we are in fact a G Suite based company. Now that helps me from a hacker perspective because that already tells me certain things about your network environment, the rules that might be in place in terms of phishing attacks, whitelisting, things along those lines. So super helpful in terms of kind of building the overall profile of the target from the hacker's perspective. Central Ops does have APIs that you can also leverage. And I would note that I think it was back in 06 or 07, fairly early into my agency CIA career, actually. I remember Central Ops was purchased by this organization, Hexillion. So Hexillion supports a lot of organizations in conducting and providing tools for, investigating and exploring and troubleshooting internet address information. And you can see here their Whois API is available. And I strongly recommend for those of you that want to dig a little deeper into these network tools to set up an account with Hexillion. You'll learn a lot, and Central Ops obviously remains a standalone website, but you can utilize Hexillion's tools as well if you want to, and they run that for a small fee, I believe. So as I mentioned at the top of our webinar, my dear friend and colleague, James McQuiggan, and I, we did an open source intelligence webinar last year. And at that point in that webinar, I talked about two Internet of Things, cyber intelligence, search engine related tools called Shodan and Census. So in keeping with that, and in keeping with, wanting to maintain a degree of relative simplicity to hasten investigations, and also kind of to show you the ease with which hackers can assess vulnerabilities, I wanted to show you criminal IP. Again, similar to Shodan and Census, sometimes it just comes down to which user interface you prefer. So criminal IP, it's, as I mentioned, it's a cyber threat intelligence search engine. It detects personal or corporate cyber asset vulnerabilities in real time. It facilitates, responses accordingly. So if you can see those vulnerabilities on your website, you know how to respond to them. With this sort of tool and functionality, you can find all types of internet-facing information on malicious IP addresses, phishing sites, malicious links, bad certificates, servers, IoT devices, CCTVs, all kinds of stuff. So I wanted to kind of give you a little walkthrough on just how some of this functionality works, just how easy it is to find this information. So for instance, the asset search. This is just a list of recent scans that these various search engines have bots that are going out and looking for all of these internet connected devices. So the scan will show as you can see here, the IP address, the scoring information. So the scoring information basically is just telling you literally just the triage, the inbound, outbound IP risk scores, safe, low, moderate, dangerous, critical. Now you see here, these are mostly moderate to critical in range. The known vulnerabilities, the number of vulnerabilities associated with the IP address, and then a summary of like open ports running, if there's past abuse history, also, any vulnerabilities that are hidden. So, and you'll see a lot of these tend to be webcam and CCTV related. So the next I wanted to highlight for you is domain search. So here we are. So domain search, it's a feature that scans the target domain. So if the hacker is focused on your domain and your IP range, that's what they're going to plug in here. Or a hacker, just based on target of opportunity, are just going to look in here and see which ones have high critical vulnerability. Because as you can see, there are a lot of them available and still very active. This was 39 minutes ago. So that, again, it lets you just target your specific domain in real time. It provides comprehensive information. It's got a risk score based on whether the website might be used as a phishing domain, whether the website contains malicious links, if it has valid certificates. So this would be helpful from an admin perspective. If you're getting consistently phished from a certain IP address, a certain URL, then you can go and safely check out that URL or IP address from this console instead of going directly to the website itself, because as we know, a lot of websites can contain malicious software that are literally just trying to inject themselves into your browser. So this is a safe way to check out those potentially dangerous websites. And then from a hacker perspective, it's a great way to shop around for highly vulnerable websites. And another this is my personal favorite, this is exploit search. So just as it sounds, this exploit feature allows you to comb through all the known vulnerabilities, like top CVE IDs here. Look at this. This is amazing. And look how old some of these are, going back to 2006. This is just old software, unpatched software, things that have not been updated. So it allows you to comb through those vulnerabilities globally and get the details on the actual exploit code for each corresponding service. So from a hacker perspective, if I have a tool, if I have some malicious software, and there is a known vulnerability I want to leverage an exploit against, I can simply look for the vulnerabilities associated, the tool, the vulnerabilities associated with the tool that I can use to leverage that exploit. Leverage my tool and find the right vulnerability for the job. It's as simple as shopping around based on CVE ID. So a lot of this you can use to almost, if you will, do what a red team would do to check out your domain safety, your IP ranges, check for internet connected devices. But, the lesson here is also just how easy it is for the bad guys and bad gals to look for targets of opportunity. So again, they might be targeting your organization specifically. This could be, a disgruntled former employee, something insider threat, something like that. Or it's simply individuals looking for targets of opportunity. And lastly, just very quickly, also this image search. This is a little different than a Google image search. I mean, it's similar in that, yes, it is an image search, but after you conduct image search using terms like RDP, phishing, webcam, you can view the specific images of those assets that are vulnerable to cyber threats. So it only retrieves images that indicate potential cyber threat based upon your reference. And, also this is paid with the organization, but you can also leverage Criminal IP's attack surface management software as well. So, again, in keeping with trying to keep things as simple and straightforward as possible, this is another quick and easy way that hackers check for vulnerabilities in an attack surface, but it's also a way that you can use these same tools to also check for vulnerabilities and get them patched as quickly as possible.
And lastly, I wanted to review ipinfo.io. It's a great little website. Again, it's very straightforward. You don't need a PhD to use it, but it's great for cybersecurity use cases. You can leverage this for managed detection and response, identity access management, security operations centers, to monitor traffic, login attempts, identify malicious traffic, things along those lines. And even looking at your overall cloud security management and posture. You can identify risks or misconfigurations. Some of the biggest cloud-based risks are just the non-configured containers. That's typically when we see issues with cloud security. So this helps map assets and discover vulnerabilities for your security teams as well. But again, if it's going to do that for security teams, it's going to do that for hackers also. So another great, very easy to use, simple web-based tool for that, that security and attack surface work. So now let's transition. We've talked about all kinds of ways to collect social media and network data. So let's talk about, now that you've gotten all of this information gathered, what on earth do you do with it? So you need apps, and you need to think about how to work with the data. So if you don't have like a cyber threat intelligence shop, or if you don't have a lot of in-house expertise on this, it can get really in the weeds on various methods of analytic techniques. So I think I'm going to just keep it very broad-based and talk about structured analytic techniques. So yes, of course, I'm going to have to mention some CIA analytic stuff because, hey, that's my background. So this is a great book, and it's a PDF available on CIA's website. It's about 40 plus pages long, so it's pretty dense reading. But if you want to learn about analytic methodologies, and these work for cyber intelligence and analytic work, as well as non-cyber real world things. But these structured analytic techniques, they're methods for analyzing intelligence data and reaching conclusions. So in this case, a lot of that's going to be attribution related from the cyber context. They were built to help avoid bias and unchallenged assumptions, and intelligence analysts in a number of fields, including cyber threat intelligence, can use the lessons that are in this tradecraft primer. So I would highly recommend checking it out. It talks about diagnostic techniques. There's like a key assumptions check, quality of information check, indicators of change check, and then a big one that we worked on when I was in the career analyst program was the analysis of competing hypotheses. So a lot of these techniques, or things that we're pretty familiar with, like devil's advocate or red teaming, team A, team B, really challenging assumptions and suppositions. So again, this is very helpful when it comes to the potential attribution portion of your investigation and those findings and the documentation you may be providing to law enforcement or insurance. And also I wanted to give a brief shout out to a really great book, Attribution of Advanced Persistent Threats. Dr. Steffens wrote this amazing book. It's a very, very dense book, but it talks about APTs, Advanced Persistent Threats, the attribution process. It goes into more detail. We've talked a little bit about it here, but he really gets into the meat of the subject. Malware analysis, geopolitical analysis, telemetry data, doxing, false flags, all kinds of things. Even talks a bit about the ethics of attribution, because it is cyberspace, and things like geolocation are very difficult to do. So that is always something important to keep in mind. So those are the analytic techniques, some general ideas I wanted to raise to your attention. Okay, so what do you do with all the data itself, the data collected from the hard drive, the NetFlow data, the data you've pulled off of your routers? Well, there are a host of software applications out there. So I just wanted to raise some of the major tools that I'm familiar with. So Analyst Notebook is really one of the analytic tools I used the most when I was at CIA. In law enforcement uses it a lot, police officers and FBI at the federal level. It's a visualization tool, and it's got some great data import features. There is a timeline functionality. The design's a little bit, could use some updating, but it's a very reliable piece of analytic software. You can build, again, mapping data, timelines, things like that, and very easy to use. You don't need a PhD to use it. And then Maltego, it's really nice if you have the ability to sort of write your own transformations. I don't believe it has a timeline feature, but I know a lot of OSINT data vendors have written a lot of transformations for their data sets, which is really great. So you can use Maltego for both the analysis of already collected data, or you can use it to collect data directly from the tool. It just depends on, what your needs are in that moment. So those are two big players in the space, and they are not the most inexpensive options, but they're very functional for what they do. Now, here's the part where you're probably going to want to throw virtual tomatoes at me for saying this, but another tool, Microsoft Excel. Look, most of us already have it. I know a lot of amazing data scientists that reliably use Excel for data analytics. And there are a lot of examples out there that people can use, and safe, non-malicious macros out there that people can use for their data analysis. It's probably already on your desktop. And a lot of people, when you have Microsoft Excel Jiu-Jitsu, you're invaluable to the organization. So it is a tool to consider as part of your overall analytics suite. So with that in summary, stay vigilant. Remember, protect and preserve all of that data. Make copies, preserve the originals. Make sure that when someone's using Incase or FTK or Celebrite, that everything is right protected so they can make a copy of the master, but the master remains untouched. Use a wide variety of tools because it's going to give you varying degrees of different information back, and then you want to marry all that information together, see what the consistencies are, see what the outliers are in terms of differentiation of data collected. Consider all of your options. Don't make any assumptions about it must be a competitor company trying to steal my IP. It could very well be North Korea trying to steal your IP. So allow for different analytic conclusions and differing points of view. And beware of OSINT threats. The OSINT threats that we've talked about, both to your network, to your individuals, that allow for these network attacks, these social engineering attacks. Keeping in mind that leveraging security culture from both a network and a culture, social perspective is so important to maintain that vigilant posture. I hope some of this was new and beneficial to you all, and we certainly welcome your input. If you'd like to see more or different information about OSINT in a follow-up presentation, I would love for you to contact our marketing department at marketing@knowbefore.com and let them know what kind of webinars you would like to see from myself and my colleagues. And with that, I thank you for attending and have a great rest of your day.
All right, and thank you to our attendees for joining us for today's session. Special thanks to KnowBe4 and their speaker, Rosa, for sharing her expertise and this great presentation. Don't forget to check out the additional resources in the resource section for more info on today's topic. And check the chat where we are announcing our prize winner. So congrats to the lucky recipient, and I'll be in touch with you soon in the community. So that's our time for today. We hope to see you soon on an upcoming event. And until then, stay safe and keep it spicy. Have a great day, everyone.